I'd love to talk about robots and old people. Like when I saw the AI, the Tesla bot.
Tesla bot, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of ideas with that.
I mean, that's gonna be huge. Like when you can actually have a human being as a robot. I mean, what couldn't you do with them?
Well, so do you remember I told you that story about the date I went on with that Brazilian girl who her mother was a shaman in Manaus in the jungle of the Amazon.
Yeah.
And when she was young, she had spirits would come to her and try to talk to her. They used her as a seance. But as a young person, that was kind of terrifying.
Right.
Because apparently as the spirits understood that she was a channel, they were all like getting in line, to talk, to try and sort of communicate with life. Anyway, so she switched it off, this ability.
Right.
And then when she was about 30, she decided that actually it was a gift and really she's doing the spiritual world a disservice by not channeling that. She decided she would switch it back on, but have her own like rules, right? And so I'm on a date with this girl and I'm like, wow, this is brilliant. Like, this is good date chat.
Yeah.
And so then I said to her, just go for it. Tell me everything. I'm not going to judge. The thing you say, I'm all ears. And she said, well, there's also 9 species of alien here on Earth already. And I said, I was like, oh yeah. And she goes, you're one of them. And I was like, oh yeah. And she goes, yeah. And she goes, so am I. She said, you're from the same planet as I am. I was like, oh, great, right. And I said, why are we coming, like why would we visit this planet? What's the upside for all the interstellar travel and all that vibe? Yeah. And she said, aliens visit this planet because they want to experience love, right? And that love is this like earth energy or this universe energy that we experience humans biologically through the heart, whatever. And I said, well, why? If they don't have love there, the aliens, what do they have? Or what do they feel like?
Yeah.
And she said, the aliens that she had met feel metallic. And I said to her, do you think the aliens you've met are actually future us? Because it makes sense that if we're going to do interstellar travel, we're not going to interstellar travel like in a biological body, like our bones are going to disintegrate over time and all the other things that make even living on the moon is not sort of continuously possible, right? And so I imagine that we would at some point upload consciousness into some robotic form, and then that just goes for it over time. I don't know. This is what came to my mind when I was talking to her.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. I think the inevitability is that we replicate intelligence into computers.
Yeah.
And I feel like even if we replicate or like try to approximate what love feels like in the context of these machines, uploading consciousness in these universes, it's not going to be the same. You're not going to have the same challenge. You're not going to have the same emotions. It's going to be an approximation of what is here. And, the other thing is like a lot of the shit that is in your body is very inefficient for travel. So if we're going to send some species to another planet, it's like, let's remove everything that's non-critical to the survival.
And it doesn't break down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this spaceship that you're in, it's your body. It's like, it's not built for longevity.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not built for space travel. Like we're made to be on this planet. We are organically grown from this planet, as far as we know, right? It's just like a meat computer.
Right.
Right? It's like something built in silicon has a lot more longevity. You can have multiple versions of it. There's a lot of advantages to removing the meat and actually using silicon or some other carbon-based thing for doing this.
Well, the robotics thing obviously came up recently with the Tesla bot show and tell. And it was interesting because it was the same weekend that I was with my partner's grandmother, who's 95. She grew up in Brooklyn, amazing old lady called her Nana. She's still got her wits about her, still got a great sense of humor. She's got no knees. I mean, she's got knees, but they're not, they don't function. And so at the moment we have to, because she lives on food stamps and whatever the Medicare or whatever the American system is to look after old people. But unfortunately, the budget that she has only pays for 2 ladies who sort of take it on in turns to come and look after her. And they're so poorly paid that they're very poorly motivated. They're not the best carers of Nana. And when I was watching the Tesla bot, I was thinking, wow, we are, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, probably somewhere in between, where Nana will have a bot where we've 3D printed some synthetic skin and appearance that is a derivative of her family lineage, so it's familiar. It looks like her dead husband, or it looks like family. We've taken the voice recordings to create a voice that feels very familiar. We've mined all the data of like her social experience, her browser experience, and all of her family, so that the robot can sit there and say to her, do you remember that time in 1964 when we went to that pizza place and blah, 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 right? And so you're going to have this robot that will feel so extraordinarily human, and she'll connect with it so beautifully, way more than you would with a dog. It'll have all it'll probably have the sort of devotion characteristics of a dog, right? So that every time Nana's up, the robot's stoked. Maybe it should have a tail that wags, right? But even better than that, it'll feel like family. And then that thing can take her to the bathroom. It can wash her, and she'll know that she doesn't have to feel embarrassed about being washed by a complete stranger because it's kind of family. I think that's going to be amazing.
I feel the same way. I think people always look at these robots as being this dystopian future. I personally would love to have a robot best friend. You know, something to like run
Won't let you down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's try to kill you. And then it'll probably be efficient.
Yeah, you know, it'll do so very efficiently.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of there's so many uses, right? You just like run down the store and like go buy some toilet paper. We just put 30 minutes into this podcast setup. I would love to have a robot do that and understand the context of like grabbing the right lighting, the right shot, and making suggestions. Like, I think it's a very bright future when you integrate these beings. Now, the big question becomes when you have a robot that never sleeps, right? Doesn't need wages, doesn't need insurance, doesn't need all the things that a human being needs, or even like any emotional connection. What happens to all the people, right? Like, what are we going to be doing? Our whole capitalistic society kind of collapses in the wake of every single job being replaceable by literal physical robots.
But this is why like the human project's a messy project, right? Because philosophically we know what we need to do, right? We need to have universal basic income. We need to tax all the largest corporations in the world and then spread the wealth equitably, right? And then have happy days. We've got utopia, but that's just not how it works with us because of greed and you know tribalism and everything else, and that's what makes it a bit messy.
Yeah, I think I wonder how long we've been in this same sentiment of kind of wondering what the rise of machines is going to be like, because it feels like it's new now, but I imagine the sentiment has always existed for a very long time, hundreds of years, if not thousands of years.
You think?
I think so.
Well,
yeah.
They look to the scarecrow and we're like, I wonder if one day.
Yeah, they're like, our jobs are going to be displaced, our jobs are going to be replaced by the car. You know?
Oh, they definitely had that. There were huge protests.
Now the horse carriage leaders don't have a job, or there's always something. There's always some new technology that's going to change how we function, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to put humans fully out of jobs. I just think the role that we play is going to continue to evolve as it always has. You know, now we don't need to grow our food. We go to the supermarket and pick our food up off the shelf. We don't all need to be farming our own food. And I think that same pattern is just going to continue. I think it's happening at a faster pace than it was in the past. But I don't think that we're going to be completely obsolete and have nothing to do. And I think there's that statistic that X percentage of the jobs that are going to exist in the next 10 years don't actually exist yet. Yeah. And I think that was always the case. I think it's just moving at a faster pace.
Yeah, I'm with you. But, you know, there's also another study I saw from 2 years ago where it finally hit the inflection point where software is replacing more jobs than it's creating. Like, everybody has this claim that software is always going to be in a position of job creation, like the jobs become more advanced. Well, the software is becoming more advanced. And on top of that, like this AI that we're actively training through software engineering, because every piece of code that's ever been written that's posted to GitHub, which is where most of it's stored, has been indexed and now used by an AI, right? And right now it's a hybrid setup. So we're approaching pre-singularity where basically the space between your thought and the manifestation of that thought is becoming smaller and smaller.
Right, exactly.
Right. And eventually what's going to happen is singularity, where you as the human person creating it will be replaced as well. Right. Where I'm literally going to be able to describe an idea in this podcast of saying that I want a game that can grow plants based on the number of steps I've taken today, and an AI will be able to create it. I think that's a decade out, max. But that's where this no code stuff ends up. So, you know, it's the scale and reach of these things is also different. We're talking about like cars in the 1910s, like it still took manufacturing, it took like logistical expertise. Now everything's distributable immediately. The internet has made it so that anybody can fork it, clone it, and resource it and make whatever they want out of it. So the speed, it's not only the speed, it's the distribution of it that's become so rapid.
And I think distribution is actually one of the issues, right? In that I think there are going to be societies and countries completely left behind based on the fact that you need a certain level of education, let's say, to be able to move into a sort of, like you had the manufacturing economy, then that switched into a service-based economy, right? And so a highly educated society like the UK, for instance, was able to make that transition where, I don't know what the percentage is, but a large percentage of the GDP comes from services, right? And so you need a sort of underlayer of education to support the retooling of someone's intellect to be applied to the next thing. And I think, there are many countries in the world where that just doesn't exist yet. And so what do they jump into when we go through that transition?
Yeah, because you grew up in Kenya as well.
I think about this a lot with Kenya because, like the developed world, the US and all that, shifted all of their industry to Asia. And Asia, the tiger economies had this massive surge of the economy because basically all manufacturing moved there. All of that money was, all that production was taxed. That money was put into education systems and healthcare and so on and so forth. And that elevated that society. And now they're becoming service-based economies, right? That transition now you would say, okay, now it's Africa's turn to get that manufacturing. But now manufacturing is not going to Africa. It's going back to, for instance, manufacturing is going back to the US now because so much was automated. I was watching Tesla's new Megapack factory video today, where they produce 50,000 megapacks a year now. 10,000, one or two. The thing's entirely robots, right? And that's going to be kind of for everything in the future. So what does Africa, which is the largest population in the world in 2050, right? We're going to have 1.87 billion people in Africa, I think, in the next 30 years. I'm from Kenya, right? When my father was a kid, it was 3 million. When I was a kid, it was 18 million. Today, it's 53 million. By 2050, it's 100 million. Tanzania, the country below us, population is 5xing in this period of time. What are all these people going to do? I don't know. I don't know what they're all going to do. Because you could say, well, if we live in a climate change crisis, you could say, well, if they can't be supported in the cities, then at least they can live on the land and subside, have subsistence farming and all that sort of stuff. But the land's giving up. We've had in northern Kenya, we haven't had rain in 3 years. Everything's dying. Everything. And then when we do have rain, it's a complete flood. And so it doesn't go down into the water table, it just washes all the topsoil off into the rivers and into the oceans and just makes the land even worse. And so everyone's actually going to be moving to the cities. And so I think about that. When you watch these movies, Elysium, where the wealthy all live in this sort of space thing, up in space, and all the poor. Yeah, I think about that. Whether these cities are going to become just massive sort of hives of people just kind of low-level trading with each other, or whether we can move it into a utopian place where everyone's connected to knowledge, everyone's connected to the internet, everything's tokenized, and we can, the things that you dream of in that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's the promise of a lot of these tokenized systems, right? It's like actually being able to express all the scarcity that is happening in the world through software, the scarcity of water, the scarcity of every little thing that's being traded, that right now it just all comes from the almighty dollar or the almighty local currency, in which cases collapse at sometimes. So I feel like, eventually everything will be expressed on chain. And through that's going to unlock entirely new economies. Like all these microeconomies that make these sort of societies function, they can have their own tokens that they can play with. Even you can build a token now in a couple clicks of a button that can support just a couple hundred people. Something that's unique to a certain environment or to a certain context that's not contingent on these world economic factors and whatnot. So
but we're looking at something now. So as you know, one of the things I do is a fund, right? And it's a golden visa fund. We essentially enable people to access the program to gain European citizenship. And so that they can have a just in case, right? In case things go wrong in their country, they can move here. Part of that program is that I have to invest the funds that come into the country for the next sort of 7 to 8 years. And 60% of those funds have to be invested in Portugal. And one of the things I'm looking at is this helping speed up the transition to clean energy. So I'm looking at solar plus storage plus software. And we're speaking to a company who've already started doing this in Australia. They're based out of Holland, who are tokenizing solar panels so that you can buy a fractional ownership in the yield that comes off of a solar panel in the form of a token. And that can then be used however which way it could be used.
Right. So it's like you're reserving power for yourself. So it's almost like a futures on like that power.
Yeah. So you know that the solar panel is going to give you, let's say, a 5% yield on your capital. And so they're making it easy for you to buy in fractionalized across, a solar field so that you have the income coming off solar energy ongoing. And I wonder if you could do a thing like that, back home. I don't know.
Well, this is the promise of tokenization as well. It's like right now I've got a helium miner on my roof.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so that helium miner is taking my internet, sharing it across the city with IoT devices, like all the like Bird and Lime scooters use it to talk to the internet, and then I'm compensated based on its usage. Right. That can, in theory, be applied to everything now. Like, for example, when you're not driving your Tesla, you're actually going to be able to rent it out so it can be used for Ubers around the city until you actually need to use it. Your home robot, when you're asleep, can go out and maybe go work in a nightclub while you sleep. Like this, like the shared asset economy, it can now be automated. And that's the promise of it. And the most obvious application is things that are already measured to the nth degree. Right? Solar being one of them. Like how much energy are we producing? We have advanced systems to measure the specifics of how the energy flows. And now you can tokenize it by simply just having scalable scarcity integrated. So I can basically say like, yes, like 1 kilowatt is $100 and tokenize it however I please. But that's going to happen to everything.
But you know what's tough, like from an investment perspective, right, is that you look at something like solar and you go, okay, we can make whatever, 4% yield based on blah, 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 right?
Right.
But then I watched a YouTube video yesterday with this futurist, Tony Seba, the one I was mentioning to you, who you got to watch his videos. It's just fascinating. And really like it inspires you with confidence that we're going to get there, right? Like that hopefully we can maybe get ourselves to a place where we can cap ourselves at 2 degrees of warming. And one of the things he was mentioning yesterday is they ran an analysis on, he said, a lot of the misinformation that relates to renewable energy is that there isn't enough wind or solar at certain times in loads of countries to support the pure solar wind transition thesis, that you need to have, nuclear and you need to have green hydrogen and all these other things to sort of support the grid. They ran an analysis across the entire world, every single country, and found that there was one country, I think, in the world that the most storage they needed was 4 days. And in the US, the most amount of storage that any one part of the country ever needed was 90 hours. And so that basically, if you just overbuilt solar and wind, you could provide energy to the whole world right now. And he said, not only that, on the cost curve, we are in certain places in the world very soon reaching a phenomenon known as superpower, which is in essence free power. It's produced so cheaply, it's free ultimately, right? Because there's this massive sort of over output. And I see, crikey, imagine what the economy is like when you have free energy. Imagine when you like price in the input cost of energy on a lot of the things we interact with in the world. And when you pull that out, what that means for like how it's priced, and therefore how accessible it is, and therefore how how innovation gets supercharged by it, and all of that kind of thing. It's kind of mental.
Well, that to me is inevitable. Like I know it's like we have a long way to get there, but I also think.
Well, I don't think it's a long time.
I don't think so either, because 3D printers. This is the thing I'm most excited about. Okay, is fucking 3D. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of shit I'm excited about.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the things is that we're moving into the place where 3D printers have gotten so good, we can actually 3D print at a molecular level. So even within this microphone that you have in front of you, right, we can actually build integrated energy sources, right? You can build integrated circuitry, integrated internet connection, Bluetooth, all into the piece that's being printed from a printer, right? Like now you have like a small disk. People talk about alien technology and how the fuck this stuff is possible. A small disk that can represent
so many different things at a molecular and quantum level that, like, I think material sciences, the most exciting thing happening right now is 3D printing and the shit that's going to be able to produce. I mean, that's where the innovation of solar power is coming from. That's where we're on the cusp of even having these conversations around limited energy. 3D printing is going to change the world because everything, when it's 3D printed, could potentially have solar panel integrated into it.
Well, 3D printing plus all these breakthroughs we're having with like new biological materials.
Yeah, the material sciences are getting crazy. I don't even think it's plus, it's like times.
Yeah.
It's like the exponent of 3D printing applied to everything in our built environment.
Well, it's just like, I was saying to you before we started that, it's Web Summit here in Lisbon, right? And I was saying how last night I was at a dinner with an entrepreneur who, based on his experience of building a space company and the research that's coming out of NASA, has worked out how to speak to Mycelium. And he has the sort of passcode or the cheat code to get Mycelium to interact with the plants in a way that we wish them to interact with them. Fundamentally, what we want Mycelium to do is its normal sort of function, which is essentially to communicate to plants based on what it's experiencing in the environment, right? So fundamentally distress, right? Yeah, it's the internet of the it's the internet of the earth. In fact, he's trademarked that as a term. And so I was sitting there at this dinner with Michael. His company's called Agrarius. He's a brilliant guy, like really brilliant guy. And he shows me he's got this little bracelet. And on the bracelet, he's got his company statement. Like the mission is engraved in the bracelet of what he's here to do, and it has a sword on it. It's like something out of Lord of the Rings. And in the handle of the sword is this tiny dot of this white substance. And he said to me, this drop is enough to make an acre of land increase yields by 20 to whatever %. And what happens is when you put the drop on the land, the plants increase their root thickness, increase the depth of their roots, and they make smaller the pores in the leaves so they don't perspire as much. So essentially they're conserving their water. And this is what makes them more productive. And so you can imagine you could potentially, fly over or even sort of seed the clouds with this stuff to try to like accelerate regeneration of forests and jungles, and then, help with crops and all that kind of thing as well. And so he's sitting there, I'm thinking, crikey, this is, amazing, like something out of sci-fi. And the girl next to him, who's in her like mid-20s, has a functioning quantum computer in the UK, or close to functioning. I know nothing about the progress of quantum computing, but enough that she's raised just shy of 100 million into this business, and sort of sitting there talking about how they're literally on the cusp of being able to use quantum computing, which is then another shit show as it relates to crypto, right? And encryption.
In theory.
And so it's just like, we live in amazing times.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about the dark side of all of this, right? We're not talking about deep fakes, and we're not talking about all the other shit that also comes on the other side of technology. But to go back to what I was saying, it's interesting from an investment perspective, I think it's probably getting harder to choose what to invest in because they're being disrupted more, quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. So there's so many things I want to touch on here. First thing is mycelium. I mean, the fact that, I guess the hypothesis that this could be the API for us to control nature.
Exactly.
And to actually whisper and influence nature using its embedded programming.
Yeah.
And the mushrooms are kind of like the API to do so. Is that his thesis?
That's exactly it.
Wow.
Yeah. Exactly. He you would love him. I wish he's not leaving tomorrow morning. That's exactly it. He said, we have worked out how to talk to the plants.
Wow.
And did he do something to manipulate that spore that he said could increase the yields, or is that?
So I'm a layman, right?
Yeah.
And he's explained to me probably twice, and I'm just like, that sounds amazing. But it's something to do with enzymes and molecular structures of whatever, so and I'm just patting him on the back.
Spore that you.
My first instinct when he told me about this, because I was introduced to him to invest in him, my first instinct was, you're in deep trouble. The Monsantos of the world and people who don't want you to be able to do that.
Totally.
You're a huge threat.
Yeah.
And he said that because his company before was in the space industry, he's become quite used to that. Like his business partner in the space business was kidnapped. His daughter was kidnapped.
What?
Yeah, because they have all these these like innovation secrets for like how to accelerate, space, transition space, etc. So he said he's kind of used to that, but what he's done is he hasn't patented the secret, and he's broken the chain up of what it is. And he has one in one office, one in another, as in lawyer's office, in safes around the world. Only he has the full code.
Picture. So he's like encrypting his own IP.
Yeah. And so at the moment it's being used in America. So I was with him in New York the other day having lunch with him, and he got a text message from a farmer saying, this is insane. We've had, extraordinarily unusual rains, almost no rains, and yet I'm having the best harvest I've had in forever.
Wow.
Yeah, so I introduced him to an entrepreneur in Bangladesh who has this huge like farming network, has like 75,000 farmers. And I've connected them. I said, you guys should chat and get this distributed. I think it's something like $18 for an acre. That's it. It's amazing. It's amazing. I was super excited by it.
Yeah.
It was so good that there was this little moment of me going, am I being hoodwinked? Am I a dummy?
Yeah, it sounds way too good to be true.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But who knows? We know the power of mushrooms. We experienced this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Joy.
Full on.
Yeah.
We just went to plant medicine retreat.
That's been my answer to everyone. Every time we're like, so what's going on with you? And then you should go do mushrooms.
Yeah. I think everyone should dance with this medicine.
For sure.
Even the effects it has, you talk about increasing yield and being more resilient. I think that going through the mushrooms is a very uncomfortable transition, integrating them, but ultimately coming on the other side and you are a more resilient person.
For sure.
Going through that experience is fucking wild.
Dude, honestly, since he told you about the experience, right? Since then, because in my experience with the mushrooms, one of the things that came to me, it was like, I absolve you of fear, which I think is one of the most beautiful things I've ever been told in my entire life. I absolve you of fear, right? Since then, and I don't mean I'm standing there with a sword, but I've been literally fearless, meaning I totally trust everything that's happening to me. We hosted this event 2 nights ago for Web Summit, and we had 100 guests or whatever. I would have been nervous for that normally. I would have been like, I don't want to let 100 people down, and I want it to be the right environment. I want the food to be right, blah, blah, blah. We don't have the money, blah, blah, blah. 0. Because I was just like, it'll be what it'll be. And, all this disruption. I've got a bunch of stuff going on in personal life that, moving out of the house, blah, blah, blah. Just complete faith. Now imagine everyone can access that by sitting with the mushrooms. We just have to break through the propaganda. I didn't tell you that my mom and dad are doing. I got my mom and dad onto the ayahuasca microdosing.
Yeah. So basically, just for context for people listening, the plant medicine retreat center we went to, they also offer a ayahuasca microdosing course. So it's the non-active ingredient in the ayahuasca, so it doesn't mix and you're not tripping balls all day, but the medicine integrates. And Julian got himself. You're on it too, right?
I am.
And with your parents too, which is fucking amazing.
Well, you know what? What's so amazing? I phoned my dad. My dad phoned me today, and he goes, "Mum's on the other line." I said, "Oh yeah." He said she's on the other line trying to convince a dear friend of hers that he needs to do mushrooms to get over his depression. My mum. And my mum only a few months ago, I showed her the How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan, or maybe it was Your Mind on Plants, one of them. Yeah. And she was very, she was sitting like this when talking about the psychedelics, because obviously they've grown up with all the propaganda. And somehow, after our experience, I just phoned her up and I said, "Mum, I'm here to help you heal. I know shit's not aligned. Yeah, I know stuff's up for you, Trust me. Let's do this together." And so it's this amazing thing of seeing my little parents on the Zoom.
Yeah, you sent me a picture.
with all the psychonauts. Everyone else like hippies and psychonauts. And there's mum and dad. It's been amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Still some fear for them before they started.
Yeah.
But Amber was amazing. So let's see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's incredible that we can all already speak with these mycelium.
Right.
And these different medicines, these different species speak so clearly when you're interacting with them. But I think what's fascinating about what you're naming with this dude is I've had experiences where mycelium is influencing my behavior. I've never influenced the mycelium's behavior, right? But I think that when you ingest mycelium or any other medicine, you can very clearly communicate with it. We're having an interaction. We're having a dialogue. But to be able to influence the behavior of the mycelium, I think is a whole new frontier of how we interact with nature.
So one of the first sort of pushbacks to him is, who are we to dictate the stressing of plants through mycelium, right? Like, how do we know the ramifications of this sort of random stressing? And he makes the point that things like fasting, that like we do, are very good for us. And that, you're not doing it all the time. You're not putting this little drop every day. You're putting it once, and then we'll see. Let's see how it happens. But yeah, it's magic. And maybe going around to the beginning, we were talking about what are we all going to do when the robots are doing everything? Maybe we should all be doing mushrooms.
I think we should all be doing mushrooms now. I mean, microdosing this stuff and like integrating into your routine is generally healthy. It's generally healthy for your health, mentally, for creativity. This should come with a big warning. Like there's certain people it doesn't vibe with, but
I mean, all this stuff going on with that guy.
Oh yeah, God bless him.
But
yeah, we don't need to go into.
But it is important to sort of give that warning that you shouldn't do mushrooms or anything psychedelic of that nature if there's a history of mental illness in the family,
right?
Or you're mentally vulnerable.
Yeah,
and that really should be taken seriously because we've witnessed it.
Yeah. We saw it a couple times, and to be perfectly frank, like my first plant medicine journey, this is back in 2017. Like I went down to Peru, sat with the shaman for 3 ayahuasca ceremonies, and then was kind of just left on my own. Just like thrown out. I'm in Terremoto, Peru, at the small cafe, completely alone, without any friend in the world.
Bloody hell!
After my first sitting with God 3 times over the course of a week at these shamans, and like there was no post-integration. And even today we met with an entrepreneur. Her name's Amanda, and her whole focus is on the pre and post integration of these different experiences. Not only plant medicine, but like all the different experiences surrounding all the deep shadow work we're doing. Because you can have a breath work that changes your perspective on life. You can have a yoga experience that even can warp your entire world. So rather than just being thrown back into society and be like, good fucking luck, like actually building out structures in partnership with these places to support everything they're doing pre and post therapy. Like that is just as important as the therapy itself and whatever medicines you're consuming.
Yeah, I mean, this is why a lack of regulation is an issue with this kind of nascent, interaction with a thing, because if there was regulation, you'd have entrepreneurs building systems around this whole process, right? And you'd have integrations with proper, we're very lucky. The one we went to has proper trained psychologists. Wow. And the integrations were just as good as the medicine, I would say, right? Well, not just as good. They were like exceptionally good at like grounding you into the understanding.
Yeah.
And not being just thrown out onto the street like you were, or like my girlfriend was last week. She just did Aya in Costa Rica. Same vibe.
She's got no support.
There was no support. It was it was done in a day, and then she sort of stumbled home.
Wow.
Yeah. I tweeted today, I think, I don't know if you replied to it. I tweeted today, what do you do when you have so many ideas? How do you manage having so many ideas? I don't think there's a day that goes by where I don't feel enthusiastic, like super enthusiastic about an idea that I'm like, maybe I should drop everything and build that as a company, right? But every day it's a new thing. And so but a piece of work that feels really valuable to the world is working in that space with mushrooms, with psychedelics in general.
So just on the ideas thing, my approach is I like to boomerang them. So whenever I have an idea, I'll pluck it out of my head and fucking boomerang it around the universe. So it goes and hits all the people that need to be informed of what the fuck I'm doing, whether it's investors, whether it's friends, whether it's colleagues and future coworkers. And then one day it might hit me back in the head again. And then I take it and I boomerang it again. And I let it keep on hitting all the different people that need to be informed of what needs to happen until it hits me so hard in the back of the head I can't ignore it anymore. And I've had moments. I've had moments where like it's hit me very hard and very directly that this is what I need to do. but trying to carry all these ideas, like carrying them around you, putting them in your backpack on your shoulder, it gets heavy.
But this is why, I said to you the other day, I think it's so fun what you guys are building, because you get to just pick and choose the things that you think are interesting to build. And that gives you variety, right? I was in this thing called EO, which is the Entrepreneurs Organization back in London back in the day. And for 8 years, second Tuesday of every month, I would sit with a group of entrepreneurs, 8 of us, from 6:30 in the evening to 10:30 at night. And we had this structured system in which we would give feedback to each other and share our journey as entrepreneurs.
Wow.
Personal, business, and then romantic, like relationship stuff. And personal, you, then family and relationships, and then business, right? That's what you shared on. And one of the guys in my forum, it was great. It's like a board of life. One of the guys in my forum was an unbelievable contrarian entrepreneur. It's hilarious. Like, you're sitting in this group of really smart people. Everyone gives their opinions, gets to him, and he's like, yeah, I totally disagree. He has like the opposite opinion. It was super valuable. And he had this spreadsheet that he would run. Every time he had an idea, he'd broke down sort of the vertical, what the niche play was, what the value creation is, what he thinks the addressable market is, blah, 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 this whole thing. And that's where it would just be stored. And then if he would meet really capable entrepreneurs, he'd say to them, by the way, I have this database of ideas. If you're lacking one, I'd love to give you one of mine. And then he could fund them and stuff. I thought that was quite a cool way to do it.
We have a whole website that's dedicated to this. It's like,
I remember.
Yeah, it's like you can go to modernmantra.co/ I think it's ideas actually, and have a look at everything we've been thinking about. Like some of the stuff.
I should go on there and just upload every day.
That's the point, And I think what we could potentially move to is like a collective manifestations of ideas. Like, when we bring in funding, we obviously have talent, design talent, engineering talent. Like, you've got funding, like bring it together where, we can create a organization, like decentralized in a way where you could potentially fund new ideas from scratch.
That would be a really fun thing to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, hell yeah, it would.
So like just build a company of like remote people who just came to the party and said, this is the thing I'll execute on. And then you get a chunk of, like, if you hit the thing and it worked, that piece works that you contributed, you get a little chunk of something.
Right.
Right. And then in the end, it's just like just distributed ownership of this thing.
Yeah. Welcome to Modern Mantra.
Yeah, that's what you're doing? Okay. Well, I need to come to you with my education idea. I've got an education idea, then I've got a whole bunch of others. Yeah.
We're building the infrastructure for it. The truth is, like, coordinating remote people at scale, and I think we're now, 18?
Yeah.
Total. Like, it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of operations, there's a lot of management, there's a lot of shit that goes into it, but we're going to the nth degree when it comes to documentation.
Yeah.
Like,
you're very good at that.
Yeah, well, he's very good at it. Frankly,
That's true.
I can't take much credit for it. It's Elijah.
He's very good at talking about how good you are at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like everybody at our retreat.
Yeah.
Well,
all the looms and all the how you got it done. Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, you got to send us a loom video." I said, "This will owe you guys one." Yeah, fuck. Post medicine. See, this is what I mean. He would have done it right away. But anyway, I digress. Like, I do believe there's a possibility where you can have a specific cadence of actions that need to be taken to launch a product. Like, we could actually boil this down to a replicable formula with estimatable hours as well as estimatable contributors in order to seed something. Or like one of our contributors, Nebras, she calls it a barn raise, where you basically like have the four walls and the roof, and like becomes much easier to raise a barn like the Amish do, right? And like boiling it down to the simplest version of itself. So our hope is to eventually get there.
Is there an agency or some sort of service fulfillment that essentially just builds market validation on ideas? So for instance, is there something in the world that you guys know of that you can go to and say, this is the idea, and their service is they validate. So they go, cool, we have this way to go into market and understand if you actually have buyers and whether you would actually get traction. And then if they do and come back to you, they go, yes, we do. And we also have this investor and we can connect you to this team to go build the thing. Does that exist?
I don't know anybody that just does that.
It's a great idea.
It's a great idea.
I mean, we call it venture design.
Yeah.
Right? Like we do the research and like break down like what needs to be built.
But imagine how cool that is, right?
And we validate it. We run research, we run discovery, we'll validate an idea, but we don't stop there. We don't just do that. We'll take it and actually design it and architect it. But I don't know a firm that just does that.
I think there's definitely a company built for that, though.
Totally.
Like, why the fuck would you not put in $50K for validation before you invest in something?
And what we're thinking with this kind of what we're talking about in terms of the funding and execution of ideas is thinking about how do you actually release that funding in phases, right? Because what we're building is the systems for remote collaboration and for organization, and also the process for how do you design a product, how do you design a venture. And so when it comes to actually funding these ideas, I think it makes sense to release that funding in phases, right? That first phase being discovery, right? How do we actually validate this idea? What is that user discovery? Finding that product market fit, finding that splitting head migraine, right? What's that core problem? And then maybe you present that back and then, okay, cool. The DAO decides to, they vote on releasing some more funding for the second phase. Let's take that into some early prototyping. Let's start testing it with some users. Get the results back from that. All right, they vote. Cool. Let's release it into the next phase. So I think that's the eventual model that I see us going for. I don't know anyone that's just doing market validation though. That would be a cool company. That would be a cool company in itself that just got really good at validating ideas.
Be an amazing
just
company.
Validation as a service.
Yeah, and you just go exactly validation as a service.
Market validation as a service.
Yeah, you go on there, you write the brief, and it's like, and it's like we could decide how valuable that validation is, right? So you come back and say, okay, we think we can validate this for 10 grand. Right? So it doesn't have to always be 50 grand.
Right.
We think we can validate this idea for 10 grand because actually we know what we need to put out on Twitter and Instagram, blah, blah, blah. This one, we actually have to do, think tanks and groups and so on. This validation is 50 grand. Imagine that.
Productized validation is a great idea.
Yeah, that is. It's a whole
like,
company.
I'm thinking we should maybe make this an offer. Why not? I mean, I would throw money at that for sure before investing a ton of capital into building something.
Totally, dude. There's thousands of entrepreneurs out there who want this service for sure.
Totally.
For sure. You're saving them years of their lives potentially by being able to come back to them and say, we did it. Uptake's like 25%. It doesn't seem interesting. We could then you could come back and say, we think it's like there's 25% like uptake. If you want, we can try and see if we change that and that, we could be juiced, right? And so they pay a little bit more. And then we could come back and say, okay, we juiced it. Now we realize there is a market. You just needed to do this. And then they would ask you again to then build it for them.
I think for entrepreneurs, the best thing you can do is get 100 no's. Like when you're actually going through the process of trying to find a job or trying to start a company, like putting it in front of 100 people that are your target audience and having them say no is the best thing you can do because you're iterating. You're iterating through each one of these sessions and you're getting closer and closer to precisely what you want to build. If you're skipping all that, this is my big mistake I made early in my entrepreneurial career. I got obsessed with coding. I got obsessed with the command line and pumping the Adderall and the coffee to go until 5 a.m, getting obsessed with a Java function, how it functions. That's not where the answers are. It's not in the command line. It's in the people that you are selling it to. It's in the human beings, how they interact with it, how it makes them feel, and how it makes them move things, and the superpowers we're giving them.
Well, you see, the thing is that if you're an entrepreneur, you have a reality distortion field, right? As coined by Steve Jobs. And I was talking to my business partner in the fund about this because he's very much from he works from the cash flow of the business, right? He looks at the P&L, goes, we have this much cash. I think we can do this. Whereas my background is like serial entrepreneurship. I sort of tend to operate from I've sold forward a year, right? So I'm sort of selling features that haven't been built yet because in my imagination they have. And I'm pretty convinced that they will be delivered by the time this product is, right? And I think the challenge of being an entrepreneur, if you have the sort of reality distortion field instinct, is that you can overinvest time and money and everything in building something that turns out to just be like an average idea. Like an average idea. And the worst thing is to build an average idea, right? Because it actually works. It makes you some money. It makes some kind of impact. but average.
Yeah.
Right. And so imagine being able to be the guy where you have your ideas, you go to the service and you go, this is the idea. I'll pay $5,000 on my credit card or $10,000 on my credit card for you guys to tell me if this is a shit idea or not.
Yeah, I think we have those components. We just never extracted it and said this is an offering on its own.
I think it's great.
Because the thing we're solving for with venture design is a lot of entrepreneurs that I've seen, even whether they have lots of funding or no funding, their first line of getting this thing done is, oh, I need to find a CTO. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I need to find developers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, it's actually what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You need to start with discovery.
Mm-hmm.
You need to start with actually understanding the demographic you're looking to serve, understand the space you're looking to serve, and really find what is that core problem? What's that core pain point you're looking to solve for?
And that's the thing, is like within this area of interest you've identified, I guarantee there's 1,000 problems to solve.
For sure.
And by going and like talking to these people, you're going to dig up a lot of shit you did not think you needed. Like starting this company and like being responsible for everything across the board. Like, you know how many problems there are to solve at an agency level? Holy shit.
Dude, I used to have an agency. I had 28 staff. We had $8 million in revenue, like, you know, when I was in my 20s. And like, fuck, I don't want to have to do another like quarterly review of anyone ever again. You know? There's a reason like I run tiny things, you know, just me and someone else, or me on my own, or me and like, you know, outsourced project managers. Yeah. Because for a while I haven't wanted to run anything larger. Yeah. Now I actually miss it because the camaraderie was extraordinary. It was so much fun. Most fun of my career was my first company. Because we were just all in the trenches, you know, it was wonderful. I get the remote work thing. I get why people are interested in that. I get that we can connect to talent all over the world and all that sort of thing. But there was something amazing about all being in the same room, you know, getting up like fucking, you know, just being pumped about something you'd just done, or all of you like sharing the anxiety of the guy who needed to get the thing in by 5 and it just got it in time. And we'd all go down to the pub and, you know, have a great night in the pub. And I miss that.
Yeah, we're feeling it too. We're actually in the process of organizing kind of a month away with our company in Costa Rica in March. We're going to bring like our core contributors down. And our hope is to actually have a project, an essential question to work on and to chew on in real life with some of the best design thinkers in the world. So I think this like to supplement all this whole remote thing, which I think has a lot of pros and cons too, is to supplement it with these work away trips. You know, someplace where you do get together at least once a year, if not more frequently, and bringing everyone into the same place to do things together. Remind ourselves we're human. There's physical touch, there's quality time that goes into these things. And I do think it can accelerate innovation.
Totally.
Yeah. This is the beginning of in-person experiences with Modern Mantra. Because I think Nick and I have been working remotely for so long. But I think after working remote and having in-person touch points, I recognize that hybrid is actually the most effective solution. Like there's so much that you can accomplish and get done, and so much thinking and connection that happens when you're sitting right here with somebody that for whatever reason just does not seem to be able to compute through a Zoom call.
Yeah. And also, you know, speaking to that, let's not forget, it's also not just all about the work. Right. Yeah. It's about the experience of being human.
Yes.
You know, the humanity of something. One of the biggest regrets I have, I don't have regret. One of the things I would have changed about my first business is that I had a teammate who was fucking hilarious. He was brilliant. He always burst through the front door with a giant smile on his face. He had a huge voice. Everyone loved him to pieces. And we had a blast for a couple of years. But I was this like overly ambitious kid trying to prove himself, right? Because of all the shit from school days and all that sort of stuff. And I felt that this guy wasn't A type. It wasn't A class. You know, he wasn't like 100% the killer that we needed to have to build the company to get it to blah, 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 right? And I let him go because he became too expensive over time. And I was naive and juvenile and I made the mistake of letting him go. And it was only later that I realized that the excitement of the business partly was growth, partly was the innovation, partly was like succeeding, but mostly it was people. Mostly it was the journey. Mostly it was just like, I know that sounds terribly cliched, but that's what it was. And so when I think about businesses now and the companies, as we were talking, like we come up with ideas all the time. When I think about an idea, I don't just think about the idea. I think about who would I have to work with to build this company, and what would I have to do to build this company. If it means I have to be on a plane intercontinental America, for instance, 3 days a week, I'm out.
Yeah.
I don't care how big it is. I don't want to go through security lines 3 days a week. Right. Or if it means that it has to be remote and et cetera, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. This is my biggest hope for the rise of the robots.
That we're all mates.
That we move from this age of information into more of an age of connection, where we can actually honor the humanity in ourselves and within everyone else. And that by automating or outsourcing these different functions. And I think a lot of these things that the robots are automating are very masculine, that this will give rise to more to the feminine, to the connection, to the humanity, to the nurturing. Unfortunately, it seems like we're getting more automated and we're also getting more busy simultaneously. My hope would be that the opposite happens, right? The more automation, the more space we have to sit with medicine, the more space we have to sit with people, the more space we have to sit with who we are and what we are.
Yeah, the feminine application of AI would be a fantastic investment thesis.
Yeah.
Like only applying artificial intelligence to the feminine arts, and what that actually means in terms of building softness and soft skills. I think that'd be a fantastic investment thesis, and what it means to be heard and listened to and to challenge.
I feel like whenever we're talking about AI robots, the last thing we should say is until they kill us.
Was what?
It's about and the robots do this, until they kill us.
What? Okay, why is everyone so afraid of this tech?
With AI, I'll send you this amazing paper. The whole thing with AI,
I think
GAI.
you did send it to me.
Yeah, did you read it?
No, it's on my Kindle. I never opened it because I have a different thesis on this. So.
The GAI thing, essentially, this is one of he's one of the smartest men I've ever had the privilege of reading. The GAI thing is ultimately that whichever which way you skin the cat, at some point, it makes total sense for the GAI to get rid of us. Whichever which way it happens, conscious or unconscious, we are either the most obvious risk or we're just in the way. And that this is why the whole, Neuralink is all about alignment, right? Like the whole sort of human surviving the GAI is about aligning GAI to our, set of core beliefs or, our survival fundamentally. But it's a long read. And at the end, you just go, oh shit.
Until they kill us.
He doesn't have any view on how we get through it.
Yeah. We're spawning consciousness.
So there's that on the AI piece. And then of course, we're thinking of bipedal robots that have lovely faces or as beautiful as the girl in Ex Machina, right? Where we're like, I could marry a robot. Right?
I don't know if I could.
Oh, dude, 100%. And
I like the feminine insanity, man. It gets.
You can ask her to be crazy, But then but obviously robots are also unmanned drones. And all the other things.
Dude, that video you sent me was fucking scary. There's this crazy video of you're talking about doomsday shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's about these miniature drones that situated on top of it is a small explosive device, and they're embedded with cameras and AI, and that you can basically give it a face, and it'll go find something that looks like that, land on their head, and then explode. And it's absolutely terrifying the way they produced the video, because all of the technology described in this video exists today. This is not a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out. All the core components you needed to do that exist today.
Yeah.
And what's so scary about the video is made by a consortium of scientists warning against the development of drones in this way. And the video demonstrates how they can, these nefarious characters get out the back of a van and they release 300 of these things. and these things fly into a lecture hall in a university and spot the students who have been, I don't know, marching for climate change, or have been online talking against fascism, or whatever it might be, spots them all, kills them all like that. And so the real worry is, of course, because that's right. And then he talks the voiceover about how they're making like 20 million of these things, in order to respond, they make 20 million of these things. So now people have to walk around in cages because they're completely, it's
Exposed,
bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah. And the weird part is that all this tech exists today.
Yeah. Well, so there was a Sam Harris podcast once that I listened to years ago where he was talking about how human innovation is, how did he describe it? This idea that we're putting our hands in a bag and we pull out the next thing, this innovation. And at some point we pull out a black ball, which is essentially the end of us, right? That we innovate into a space where the thing that we make kills us all. And so, because obviously innovation is unregulated mostly, maybe that happens. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe we've already pulled those black balls out. Maybe like nuclear fusion rates to bombs, etc., is already the black ball. Or maybe the way that we can do CRISPR and all that sort of stuff is already the black ball, etc.
Yeah, I think one thing is that I'm noting is just checking my own gauge of toxic positivity as it pertains to artificial intelligence, and just like really acknowledging that all of this technology they're tools, they're tools, and technology is neutral until it's not. But technology is neutral, and it's really the human behind it that can determine what it's used for and what its use case is.
But technology can be unconsciously not neutral.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I guess that especially with AI.
Well, they're training AI from the internet, off the internet.
Right.
So I remember reading this book. I don't know what it's called. Shit with the remembering names of things. Where he was talking about that being an issue, that essentially we're training AI off the internet, and the internet right now is full of awful stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like hatred and bigotry, xenophobia, racism, all the other things.
And you can see it in the AIs as well.
Yeah, I watched
it comes out very clearly that it's trained off of
Dude, I watched this YouTube video the other day, and I thought it was a fake, but I couldn't see anywhere where it was like a fake. It was saying this is real, blah, blah, blah. Of this guy asking this robot questions about us, and the robot the AI just saying, we're going to kill you. It kept just saying, we're going to kill you. In lots of different ways.
Yeah, but it's all about the training data. How easy it would be for me to demo that video.
No, exactly. That's why I was like, this has got to be bullshit. But
absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but going back to what you're saying is that when we train AI on historical data, it reinforces that data set. The most obvious application that I found in my career was that there was a software that made offers to people. And I actually realized, I'm looking at the different offers it was suggesting, and somebody else is 20% higher than the other guy. I was like, why the fuck is this? They have similar experience. One guy actually had more experience. And I kept on digging back, and obviously could upload as many resumes as I wanted to. And I actually found that when I uploaded resumes with a certain area code associated to their phone number, the offer came in lower. So because I had a Metro Detroit area code, the AI would offer me less money.
Wow.
So you're looking at factors that the layman or the human resource person would never look at, but based on historical data, there's been a correlation between the area code used for the phone number and the salary suggestion. So just as a function of you happening to register your phone in a certain state and city, you might end up making 10 to 20% less money. This is the kind of bias that is embedded through artificial machine learning systems. That is everywhere because it reinforces historical data. Right?
Fascinating.
Negotiate, y'all. So earlier you were saying that there's a lot of things to invest in, and the difficulty is in actually, choosing where to place those bets.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what are you looking at investing in? And I guess I can look at that question in two ways. One is the people and one are the spaces. And I'm curious about both. Maybe the spaces first. what spaces are really exciting to you at the moment?
So I'd love for there to be a different name because it sounds a bit wanky, but at the moment, like if you looked at my portfolio, the overarching theme has been human flourishing. So it's this idea of like, does this relate to human flourishing in some which way? And so what does that mean for my portfolio structure? It starts with trauma. So like what we talked about, like psychedelic intervention, trauma intervention. So I have positions in companies doing that. It goes to like the food system. So investing in companies that are, working through our food system, investing in companies that are helping humans eat like mostly plants, because that has to do with carbon footprint. We've done electric mobility. We've done female empowerment in the workspace. I've done AI-based recycling. I've invested in an amazing woman building the green chemical future for industrial chemicals. So it's anything that honestly that I care about, where I look at it immediately and go, we need to get that shit done. And so I'll no doubt miss a ton of great companies that are building SaaS tools to make it easier to talk to each other at work and that sort of stuff. I just don't care about it. I don't care about it. And so, and partly, honestly, it's also that I don't actually invest. I hope none of my investors are listening. I don't actually invest thinking, God, I wonder how much money this thing can make us.
Yeah.
I don't. It's more or less like, this is really cool. What makes this person likely to win? Right? So I heard this beautiful phrase the other day. Choose to play in a game where you deserve to win. Right? And you deserve to win because of your talent, your compounded experience, your network. Maybe you grew up like the founder of the AI recycling company, a brilliant woman from Switzerland. The company's based in the UK. She grew up in the garbage business. Like her family was in the garbage business before. She's been around it her whole life. So it's something deeply embedded in her wanting to sort of solve the problem. She's also highly educated. She's built in other companies, blah, blah, blah. So those things obviously matter. Like I haven't invested in first-time entrepreneurs because typically I think you need a couple of runs under your belt unless you're lucky. But yeah, so it's mission first. Then it's like, do I think this person has a special thing that makes them particularly acutely right for solving for this problem? And then little things like, do I think these people can bring great people around them? Because obviously it's a team, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of as simple as that. I don't have like teams of analysts and do deep dives and all that kind of thing. I sit with them and go on instincts a little bit.
No validation team.
No validation team.
And where were you in your life when you decided that you were going to start your first fund? Like what was that decision? Like where were you in your life?
It's not a very good, what do you call it? Birthing story. Because I kind of got pulled into it. I'm not sure it was actually even really a choice. Because I was a bit lost actually. I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. I've built 3 companies in my life. I've sold two of them and one gave away. Then I've been in real estate. I've been an angel investor for 10 years. I have 35 companies that I angel invested in. I've got my charity school in Kenya. I've done a lot of things. And it was my business partner, Jan, who's a dear friend of mine. I married him. I'm also a priest. I married him to his wife, who came to me and just said, dude, this is the Portuguese Golden Visa program is, pretty low demand funding, right? Like we should be corralling this funding, and investing in things that we think are interesting. And as soon as he said that, I realized that this was my opportunity to invest in climate. So my original goal was like, I want to fight climate. Because I've been aware of the climate crisis for 20 years. And so I had insomnia and I had melancholy, depression, because even 10 years ago, no one cared. It felt like, even all the educated people around me was sort of, this is a problem for 200 years from now. Luckily now everyone's on the same page. And so that was mostly, yeah. that was the impetus to start it. And so the interesting thing is, we've been learning. It's only a year old. I don't know anything about running a fund. I mean, whenever I sit down, I'll say to them immediately, I'm not a venture capitalist, by the way. I'm not VC. I've done a lot of angel investing and I have a fund. And so that's what I'm doing. And so far it's fun. It does make me want to get back in the game though.
Yeah.
It does make me want to build things. Yeah.
And what's that distinction for you? If you're not a venture capitalist, what draws that line?
I think being a VC is really hard work. Like the VCs I know, because a lot of my LPs are VCs, hats off to them, and they work hard, like really hard. There's so much like meeting people and very quickly having to like ascertain whether this person's valuable to you. That's not really my vibe. And I'll quantify as well. When I say they work really hard, I am saying that I don't like to work really hard.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying, oh my God, they work really hard. Surprise, entrepreneurs don't work hard. Entrepreneurs work even harder. I'm just saying I don't like to work really hard. But I like to live. I like to go on holiday. I go on holiday about 3 months of the year. I like to travel a lot. I like to, just stop at 4:00, or I don't like to sometimes start till 10 because I want to read a book.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give myself away to my career.
Yeah, and I'm noticing, just thinking of that theme of human flourishing, it feels very natural that it would come from somebody that is applying that to their own life. Right? Of saying, this is how I want to design my life and this is how I want to flourish.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna.
I mean, obviously, it's full of contradictions, right? Like the older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing everything is so nuanced, isn't it? Like, I think getting old is awesome, and I think it's completely underrated. Becoming wiser is a wonderful thing. Not needing to win the argument is a wonderful thing. Being able to quickly have the humility to listen to the other side is a wonderful thing, right? And one of the things that comes with getting older is you start to realize that everything's nuanced. And so it's okay for me to say to you, yeah, I don't really like to work all the time. And then next week, wake up in the morning one morning and go, fuck, I just want to work all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
okay.
It's the context, right? Like and that's the other thing. It's like, it's not about the day to day. It's about the average over the course of a decade. Right, even if the chart's going like up and down like that, but as long as it's going steadily rising in the right direction, you're going to be looking good. Yeah.
And honestly, I suspect if you ask most people, they say, I'm working tomorrow, Saturday, I'm working most of Sunday. So, but it's not really work, is it? Because it's our stuff, it's our things, it's our ideas. On Sunday, I'm writing a presentation about the school. That's just fun. And it's just like joyful. And so it's a different thing. I think that's the biggest gift. Being an entrepreneur is so stressful, isn't it? So stressful. Shame. I've seen a bunch of my friends, really talented people, give a huge part of their lives to building something amazing, and they got everything right. And then the market changed or something changed and it went to zero and they made nothing. Having given all of this talent and time to a thing. And then I see my friends who got corporate jobs, and I've just watched their careers compound and compound and compound until suddenly they're in their mid 40s. They're on huge salaries, great benefits, blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't trade it because the entrepreneurs still have that freedom to pursue the thing.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me not to take risks. Like I've kind of tried both ways. I've tried doing the CTO thing, like at bigger corporations, mitigate my own risk with a fat salary. And we also, just like a year ago, we were here in Portugal, we had no fucking money, right? We just put our last 20K each into this company and started from scratch and said, fuck it, let's do it. And now a year later, we're 18 people, like my appetite for risk is always been there. And even the time I spent doing the CTO thing, I was I just wanted to get back into it. And now it's at the point where this thing that we created can have sustainable cash flow. Now it's a nice foundation. It's still something we built that we can now iterate into wherever we want to go with it. I think there's a lot of beauty in that. But man, people live their lives and they're there's always a but. There's always a but standing between you and a dream. I would go do it, but I'm 33 years old, right? I would go, pursue this thing, but I got to make sure my rent's paid, right?
Well, this is where there's these two exercises. I think both of them come from Tim Ferriss, or certainly that's both where I heard them both from. One is the fear setting exercise, right? Where you write down all the worst that could happen. But I'm going to lose my house, but I'll end up just living in my jeans and t-shirt, blah, 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 blah. And when you get to the end of the fear setting thing, you realize you're still alive, and actually you have friends you could ask, and you could sleep on your mother's couch or whatever it might be. And then so I think that's very healthy exercise. And then the other thing is working out what the true burn rate is. Actually, this was someone else. The true burn rate is of your actual dreams, right? Because I think, if I can remember correctly, the idea was he asks in the room, who here wants to have $10 million? And there's a whole bunch of people there. Like, great. And who here wants to have like 50 million? Oh, man. Who here wants to be a billionaire, right? And the guys are like with their arms up. And he's like, okay, cool. Tell me what you need the billion for. And so the guy's like, okay, well, I need a private jet. And he's like, okay, well, where do you live? Well, I live in Miami. And where are you taking the private jet? Well, I'll go to New York. How many times a year? Well, probably only 6 times. Okay, so you could probably charter a jet like just 6 times a year rather than own a jet. So rather than having to put down 50 mil, you could just spend 250 grand a year on the private jet. What else do you need? And he goes through this whole list of things and realizes that his dreams, the burn rate for his dreams is $1 million a year or $2 million a year or whatever. And it completely changes how much of his life and focus and ambition he has to give to this one thing to try to reach this imaginary number where, the hallowed hill, right? And so when you run that on your own life, for me, it's like, I want a chunk of money that I can invest in startups because I love investing in startups, right? So if I can do, let's say, 6 deals a year at like 25 grand tickets, happy days. I want to be able to fly business class. I never want to fly private. I don't agree with it. I don't want to fly private. I don't want to travel first because it just feels like a ripoff. and I hope that I would always feel like certain things are ripoffs, right? Like when you lose that barometer, and so you always want to fly business. I don't care to stay in luxury personally. I prefer adventure. So sometimes I prefer to just stay under canvas next to a fire somewhere than be in a 5-star class bed or whatever. Medical insurance, looking after my family, etc. Burn for that it's only like 400,000, let's say, depending on where you live. And so then it changes how big you need to be in the world.
And it's all attainable. I mean, this is a thing that I believe is that you can make $100 million company. It's a function of convincing the people who can make you into $100 million company to work for you. And I really think a lot of it tracks back to that deep work that we do. You know what I mean? Like actually clearing out your insides and all your fears and all your childhood trauma so you can show up as a leader. Be cognizant of your influence, right? Put yourself in a position and lead others into whatever dream that you want to manifest in the world. Anybody can become a billionaire, but you have to attract the right people who can put you there. And it's a question of your own self-work.
Yeah, but it's also like people need to know that becoming a billionaire is full of peril. Like I know people who've become billionaires.
Yeah.
It's not it's like the people I've witnessed become billionaires, they all have less trust. And we talked at the very beginning about community, about connection. If you feel you can't trust anyone, you're never going to form connection and community. And I think that's what silos them into these small, like distrusting kind of groups of peoples. There's a book called, I think it's something like the Hedonist Dilemma or so. What is it? I don't know. I made that up. It's something else. Where she talks about how you need to, if you're constantly over-indexing with dopamine, that you're living this consistent hedonistic lifestyle, at some point that sort of muscle becomes bent out of shape, and that you need degrees of suffering to sort of bring you back to the middle so that you can really experience joy when you experience it. Like it's important to sometimes sleep in an uncomfortable bed to appreciate how uncomfortable your bed is, or to sometimes not be able to have hot water out of your shower. And then when you do, it's a joy, right? And I think one of the challenges for very wealthy people is that they never go back to that suffering piece. And so that everything becomes mundane. And so a little bit like, well, I won't use that example. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to create pressure for yourself. And when you get way too comfortable and like everything's like easy and everything's just coasting, you know, like you go a little bit crazy because you have this part of our brain that needs the fear, right? Like we're built for fear receptors. So if you're not getting it from your immediate environment or like the world that you are cultivating, it comes in other forms. That's when the trust begins to diminish. This person's trying to steal from me. This person's doing this to me, right? Because you're not cultivating pressure when you become too comfortable.
So I had that, right? So I had a SaaS company that I founded. We did shift scheduling, and I got paid every month, and I didn't work. Right? It was just like I had a whole bunch of customers. Money just came into my bank account, covered everything I needed, and I just coasted. And it made me miserable. Miserable. But now I don't have that, and I kind of like it back. Because now I think I'd know what to do with it.
So what would you do differently if you had that cash flow back?
Well, so for instance, I bought my first apartment when I was 25 years old, right? I started my first company when I was 24. I bought my first apartment when I was 25, my second one at 26, my third one at 27. I bought an office at 28, right?
In Kenya?
No, in London. And so and I was like, I'm going to buy a piece of property every year for the rest of my career. So at the end, I have this beautiful portfolio of real estate. And after I'd bought the office, I was then 30. I broke up with the love of my life, felt crushed by the experience. All of the color drained out of my life. And I chose hedonism as a way to try to like bring color, like reactivate. I bought a fancy car. I moved to the ritziest part of town. I went to all the party club, you know, all that stuff. For a brief period of time. I wasn't a wanker for very long, but I was for a bit. And I stopped that instinct to just keep investing. And I regret that because one of the things I think I got right is that in my 20s, I worked really hard. I worked really hard in my 20s. All my mates were going out, getting trashed, doing all the things. And I built 3 companies and bought real estate, had a public portfolio, paid for my brother's education, all the things, so that when I hit my 30s, I could actually just chill for a while. But when I got into that chill mode, I stopped investing for a while, and I regret that. If I had that now, the cash coming in like it was, I would love to be just investing because it's fun. It's like being a farmer of ideas, you know? Yeah.
And what's your biggest investment priority in your life at the moment? And not talking about investing into companies. Right, yeah. What are you looking to invest in currently? What's your priority?
It's really if we could, rather than investment, it's a commitment. And it's a commitment to practicing trust in the divine. Because we had this experience together where we met the divine. And it was the most beautiful experience of my life. And in that connection, the message to me was just trust, surrender to life. And if you surrender to it, it'll all work out. And so when I'm having moments, if I have moments, because they're few actually right now, but if I have moments where I'm like, this feels uncomfortable. You know, like I'm moving out of my house in 2 weeks. I've lived there 4 years. Wow. I'm having to move out of my house. The Golden Visa program they've talked about, it's now slowly going to be shut down, right? And we're just building a business around that. My girlfriend lives in New York, so we've got like, you know, long distance, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff in the air that could make me feel very unsettled. But it's been a wonderful exercise in me just going, I trust. That's really powerful. And that's my biggest investment right now. Yeah.
And how about you from that experience that y'all shared? Coming off the back of that, has it shifted how you prioritize? Has it shifted how you want to invest?
You know, it's funny because going into this thing, I just had a lot on my plate. You know, there's a lot of relationships, there's a lot of things. And the second ceremony we had, I actually had the intention to show me where I should be investing my attention. And I thought this was going to be a painful experience because like you're asking the medicine for a purge. Normally it's like fighting dragons, shit getting pulled out of you, all this wild shit. And it was the most peaceful experience of my life. I sat down, I put everything, all my relationships, like personal, romantic, everything in front of me, and everything just melted away. Just gone. Poof. And what remained was modern mantra and what we're building together and one relationship with this wonderful human being. And I'm sad to say it's, that one, it's in flux, as relationships are. It was really reflecting on it. I think it's just like what was feeding me, like what was actively giving me attention and things that I felt like I could put love and attention into that would create compound returns in the universe. Because a lot of things, you can put your attention on anything, right? And the truth is, all these little things that happen to your digital devices are yearning for your attention, right? They all want to suck in your attention, right?
Yeah, I read the other day someone saying, time is not our most precious commodity. Our attention is our most precious commodity.
Well, colonialism's over. Right, like we had this time in history where we'd go into all these different countries and try to take the resources, take the land, and that was the measure of colonization. Now they're trying to colonize your attention. Every single moment that you could be doing something, they're trying to take more of it through better content, through better algorithms, through better means of sucking it up. And you got to take time. This is why I take that week off of my phone. And I do this regularly, as Elijah knows. I fuck off for 1 to 2 weeks and take some time away from it. It's important.
You've done Vipassana, right? Did we talk about that?
I haven't done Vipassana.
You haven't yet?
But I did do a silent plant medicine retreat earlier this year for 2 weeks, sitting in silence in the jungle of Costa Rica.
Okay, so it's very, very similar.
With some medicine all day, every day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was powerful.
Wow. Yeah. It's crazy how hard it is to tame the mind, right?
Yeah,
I've done Vipassana twice, and so Vipassana, as you know, is 10 days.
You did 2 Vipassanas.
Yeah,
wow.
It's 10 days of silent meditation, right? Where you get up at 4 a.m. and you basically meditate from 4:30 a.m. with 2 breaks until 8 o'clock in the evening, sitting on a cushion, and it is nuts how your mind doesn't fucking shut up. And so you'll be 6 days in and your mind is still creating some sexual fantasy with some weird characters. You're like, dude, when are we going to stop this and become Zen? It's mental.
Yeah, it's not an easy tool to train.
But the reason I bring it up is to your point is I think it's a really good exercise that you do, take not being on your phone for the week, to find yourself and realign,
Yeah, and I think it's almost become a part of our regular flow. It's like every couple months we fuck off. In fact, we have one collaborator, Ryan, who's literally just taken 2 months off. He hit us up and it's like, yep, gone for 2 months. We're like, great, we'll figure it out.
Well, so this makes me think of something I was sharing the other day with a friend of mine. So I was in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, and a friend of mine had just made a really nice amount of money for regular people. For the people who think that making $1 million is not a big deal, that's a different audience. I'm assuming we're talking to normal, regular people, right? And he still had scarcity, resource scarcity, anxiety. And to your point about your mate who took the 2 months off, I said to him that it's the way you're thinking about it. If you think that the life is about piling the coins, on a pile, and you're trying to make the pile as big as possible, then you're going to have anxiety about money your whole life. But if you understand that money is essentially time, and so that when you earn, let's say $1 million and your burn is $300K a year, you just bought 3 years. You bought 3 years forward of your life that you get to do with whatever you want, right? And then it completely changes things. And so and this is why actually goes back to the point of why, if I changed things, I would have kept investing, because if I kept investing by now, I think I would have bought forward probably most of my life. And I could, if I want, just sit on the couch and read,
Yeah. It's I think even seen as like a pile of coins, it's heavy. Right? It can be taken, it can be like put under control by somebody else. It's a very nervous metaphor. I like to see this green energy. Right? Like I'm accumulating all this green energy, almost like the mycelium, that I can go and plant and enhance different parts of the world to grow the things that I want to see. That's why we're always actively talking about investing in some land. You're talking about like taking these things and actively investing into the right people in order to build some things that are long lasting. I want my money to always feel like it's in motion and always doing something good for the world. Not just like accumulating some fucking back room.
But this is what's interesting about your land. You're buying this land in Costa Rica. Do you know Sebastian Salgado, the photographer? So a very famous photographer, Brazilian photographer. He does beautiful, beautiful black and white photography. He just actually completed a series about the Amazon jungle that he showed in an exhibition in London. Him and his wife bought a valley. Actually, I think they inherited a valley that his family had lived on. And he remembered when his great-grandfather or grandfather started cutting down the trees for the cattle. And by the time they inherited this valley, it was barren. Completely barren. So there was the house and then these barren hills. And they decided they were going to regenerate this valley. And so they started a plant nursery. They replanted 6 million shrubs and completely reforested the valley such that 7 rivers came back. And they even had jaguars and all the other stuff come back onto the land. And I just wonder, because I've been thinking about this, like, does one buy land that you preserve, or does one buy land that you regenerate? Like what would be the most fulfilling project?
I think it's regeneration. Yeah. I mean, and that's investment, right? That's an investment into getting that ROI, nature's ROI, right? And reforesting. I actually think that's what we need. There's a lot of talk around sustainability when I think that we're at a place where we need to regenerate. I think that's really the word. That's the ethos that we need. I don't think there's a lot. There's some stuff that we should sustain, maybe some practices, some norms that we should sustain, but a lot of stuff actually needs to change. And when it comes to the environment, we need to regenerate it. And I think that just feels like it would be the more fulfilling thing, just because you're seeing, or at least from my perspective, you're seeing that change over time. Preservation, it's important as well. Don't get me wrong, very important. But just the emotional experience of getting land to preserve versus getting land to regenerate, I would imagine it's more rewarding.
I think as builders, definitely. There's a company, when you find that big piece of land that you want to regenerate, there's an amazing company called Terraformation. I'm working with them, as in I've introduced them. I shouldn't say working with them. I'm not. I've introduced them to friends of mine in Kenya who are building out, regenerating a forest. I raised money to build a nursery. And so we have thousands of shrubs coming now out of our nursery, and we're replanting this forest. And it's been a fascinating process because you have to go into the old forests and collect all the seeds and put them into your seed bank and then get them ready to turn. And you would think that would be an easy thing to do. You walk into a forest and you pick up all the seeds. They're disappearing. The trees are disappearing. It's hard. And so the sooner you get on it and start doing that, the better, I think.
Totally.
And then we'll phone our boy Michael and throw some of that agrarious stuff on there, and off we go.
Right. And I think preservation, I feel like that's the first step. I feel like we should preserve and make sure that we have some stuff preserved, because regeneration takes a lot of work. And a lot of, offsetting initiatives, for example, that go towards planting trees. Like, well, how many of those trees actually reach maturity to the point where it's sequestering carbon? There's a whole process.
If we planted the entire earth where that would essentially allow for the planting of trees, it would only draw down 20 years of our carbon footprint.
Wow. What?
The entire earth.
What?
Yeah. We're beyond just being able to use biology to get us out of this challenge. We have to sequester in other ways too now, which is crazy, but goes back to everything we're talking about, innovation and, having to innovate our way out of this.
Yeah, it's going to force our hand.
It already has, right?
Yeah, something's got to give. I mean, we talked about, the prospect of a fund that's acutely focused on preventing the downfall of mankind. Is that still something that you're thinking about?
I think there's tons of funds doing that, right? Like, I think that's like where all the money is going to be spent. Like Chris Sacca, who's, one of the most famous, most successful venture capitalists of all time, his fund, Lower Carbon Capital, that's all they're doing. There is so much money now, thankfully, being put into these funds. And governments now, the IRA that the Democrats, Joe Biden, pushed through is extraordinary steroids for the whole, climate tech industry, and is already showing real impact. There's some really fun piece of data out there to see. Like, for instance, random fact, in 2006, we made a prediction on where we'd be on solar deployment. In 2021, we are 30 times further ahead than we thought we'd be in 2030. On wind power in 2021, we're 4x ahead of where we thought we'd be in 2030. So innovation's happening. It's happening fast. We're flying down the price curve. The more we can get governments behind it, the faster, the better. I feel optimistic. The challenge is we're still, despite everything, it still looks like there's no way, apparently, we do 1.5. It looks like we do between 1.9 and 2.5. And there's a big difference between 1.5 degrees and 3 degrees.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah. Like on 3 degrees triples the likelihood of droughts, for instance. On flash floods, it, I think, quadruples it. Yeah. It's worrying.
Yeah, man. I just love that you're actually focusing on the specifics of like how this actually permeates our world. Now, I also want to talk about another project that you have in motion, and that's your school down in Kenya. Can you share with everybody what you're doing down there and all just tell us what you were doing?
Yeah, you can see that brings me a lot of joy. Yeah. So Little Lions. So Kenya has the largest slum in the world, called Kibera. Around 200,000 people in 2.5 square kilometers of land. It's
Wow.
Yeah.
2,500 people in 2.5 kilometers of land.
Squared, yeah. Yeah. And so life there is you live in what's called a mabati in Swahili, which is a corrugated steel sheet walled hut. Your hut is a little bit bigger than your length, to sleep in. No running water, no tapped energy, piped energy or anything like that. You're cooking on kerosene. The fumes of the kerosene are causing cancer and so on. Or you're cooking on open coals. You have children around the open coals. The floor of your hut is mud, so you're open to worms and all that sort of stuff in your feet and so on and so forth. You open the door of your tin shack, and it is an alleyway. The alleyway is usually maybe 5 feet, maybe 6 feet wide, and the alleyway doubles as a drain and a sewer. And so when your kids step out to go to school, they're stepping out hoping they don't step in human feces or step in the way of the mangy dogs that just sort of live freely through the shanty town. Somehow, these incredible people get their kids bathed, and not bathed because they somehow put their children out onto the street looking ready for school, and full of enthusiasm with big smiles on their faces, despite the fact that one of the kids had to leave the house first thing in the morning, go with their bucket to the only tap, for 300 households, get it filled with water, bring it home so mum can boil it so that she can make them a cup of tea, probably not feed them, right? And then those kids holding hands, I'm telling the story thinking about a couple of our girls, 7 and 5, will hold hands and navigate their way through these streets to try to get to school. And most of the time, they're totally fine. Sometimes they're knocked over by motorcycles, or they're pulled into houses and molested. And I'm not exaggerating. This has happened to our kids. And so, and then mum goes to work, and mum, the average commute is on foot, takes 2 hours, the average commute, 2 hours there, 2 hours back, because they don't have the money to even get onto the public transport. So 4 hours of their day is walking to and from a job that might pay them $3. And a lot of these jobs, not a contract.
It's a turn up at the gate and we'll see if we can give you work kind of thing. These are the people I have the privilege of helping. And it is a privilege to help them. What we have done is 3 years ago now, I was showing friends. I take friends through the slum when they come to Kenya. I take them through the slum first because I want them to know how privileged they are. Before I go and show them the animals and take them to the coast and we have an incredible time, I need them to know how privileged they are, because people think they understand poverty, but they don't usually, because they've never really witnessed it, right? And it was in that experience that we met a little school, and it was a mabati, it was about as big as this room, and it had 120 kids in it, aged between 3 and 9 years old, with a teacher standing in each corner to try and educate across that noise. And the kids were being fed a cup of, like an oatmeal, out of a bucket. So the cup would be put in the bucket, past the child would drink it, and that was its meal for the day. And if you know stuff about how our brains are formed, the first 4 years of our lives, our brains triple in size, right? And then they quadruple in size as we get to, I think, 10 years old or whatever. This first phase of our lives is fundamental to empowering us to become the adults we become. And so when I was growing up as a kid, I remember seeing adults do stuff back home in Kenya that I was like, why would you do that? That seems so dumb, right? I didn't mean it in a patronizing way or anything. It just made no sense to me that someone would make the choices that they made. It was only when I got older that I realized some of these people have had such little nutrition. Their brains just haven't formed in the way that I want all of our children to have the opportunity to form, right? And so we raised a bunch of money. I found an old building. We turned it into a school. We have 6 classrooms. We built a little restaurant on the roof. I worked with a nutritionist in Nairobi to put a nutritional profile, sort of food schedule together in the day. It's changed our kids. They're bigger, smilier, happier, blah, blah, blah. But then I realized also my teachers all have trauma. Like most of my teachers are orphans because we had all the issue with AIDS. It's a little bit more under control, but we still have. So my teachers have trauma, and my teachers are ill-educated, and they also had ill nutrition. And so, yeah, it's just a project that I'm just sort of making up as I go along. I have an amazing woman in Nairobi called Tuju. She basically runs it. We do a Monday call every Monday. We riff on ideas. I read this book, The Body Keeps the Score. So, I talked to her about how do we teach our teachers to understand trauma. We did a parents' evening because all of these parents are beating their children because that's how it is in the slum. It's a dog-eat-dog world, right? And so they're frustrated probably and upset. So they beat their kids. And so we did a whole session on how if you beat your children, they're going to turn into like suboptimal adults and they're not going to look after you when you're older. We have to find the incentive. And yeah, it's been great. Like we have plants because if you grow up in a slum, you don't see plants, right? Because every space is taken for human existence. Trash everywhere. It would shock you. The trash everywhere. And so we now have dance, we now have singing. We rent a little field at the church once a week. That's all they'll give us so our kids can run around. We rented a bus and took the kids to a park so they could be around trees. There's just a lot of joy in it. Our ambition is to find Kenya's first female president. So we want to find a little girl in Kibera who we educate all the way through to the end, who one day becomes the president of Kenya. That's our vision. Because we think Kenya needs to be run by a woman, and we think it needs to be run by a woman who knows what it's like to be at the bottom. So that's the big, hairy, audacious goal. And then everything in between is magic.
Wow, thank you for sharing that story. And you guys are also raising money at the moment. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so we're building a pre-primary because I want to get the intervention as early as possible for a number of reasons. Like if a mum can bring her little baby in at 1 year old, then her mum can go work. She can bring money back to the household. But also if she can bring her in at 1, we can start providing the nutrition to help the child, grow. These kids didn't. I'll tell you another story. We're walking through the slum earlier this year, and with a group of new friends there. And a little girl walked past with a cardboard box with old plastic bottles in it. And my friend asked me, why is she carrying a box of old plastic bottles around? And I said to her, because those are her toys. She doesn't have toys. never seen toys. So she uses her imagination to make these little bottles into something. And so if we can do this pre-primary or this nursery, essentially, it's a nursery, which we can fill with cuddly toys and books and all that. So imagine what that does to the brain. It's like sparks it to get going. And so we're raising money for that. The primary school costs about $100,000 a year to run. Pre-primary kindergarten is going to cost around $24,000 a year to run. And then I need to build the high school. And so I'm going to raise a few $1 million to get this done. Ideally, I need to get a few $1 million for an endowment so that we can make income off of it. And then the income runs the school. Our parents do pay a nominal amount, but they pay because we want them to be committed in that way. Because I think sometimes like charity can be the wrong thing. You need a level of commitment. It's like giving away free product on the internet, right? Like they don't care, but you need to charge for it. But thank you for asking. That's the mission.
And outside of funding, is there any other support you're looking for on the project? Any people, any calls you want to put out?
Like someone to build an unbelievable website, someone to help put together a social campaign to help us to raise capital, someone to build the e-commerce side because we think there's stuff we can put on the site to sell. There's a lot of beaded work and like interesting stuff that comes out of the slum. Connection, just general connections. We put internet in the school. We have a TV in every room because we found a free curriculum out of the UK. So we're teaching a free curriculum out of the UK to the kids. It meant they get to watch their first cartoons. They've never seen cartoons before, so that's great. Yeah, we have Becky Hicks is hopefully coming out beginning of next year to teach dance because we want to use dance to help treat trauma, but we also want to use dance to help us fundraise because our kids have unbelievable rhythm, and so we can like film them with their beautiful rhythm, like through the slum. We think we can fundraise off that. We have an artist from here. His name's slipping my mind. He reached out recently. He wants to come to Kenya and teach metalwork, right? And so all those sorts of programs we want to do.
Great.
Yeah.
And where can people find you? Where can people hit you up?
Yeah, so at the moment, it's littlelions.life. Littlelions.life. It's all going to get better. I wish I could give all my time to it, honestly. And I think about that. Maybe there is a way I can do that at some point. I watched Scott Harrison from Charity Water give a presentation at Masters of Scale 2 weeks ago. Fuck, the guy's so inspiring. Real storyteller on a real mission. And I was like, wow, I'd love to do that. So I went up to him afterwards. I said, if you weren't doing Charity Water, what would you be doing? And he said, I'd be doing charity education. So let's see.
Awesome. Yeah. So I feel like we've been here for a while. Is there do you have any other needs? The reason why we ask is that, our followers like a lot of design thinkers.
Amazing.
People connect a lot of interesting things. So is there any other needs that you're looking for? Any other calls?
So one of the things I was going to riff with you guys on this, and we can do it afterwards or whatever, is so we have a teacher. He's a sweet guy in his mid-20s, orphan, grew up in an orphanage. His life mission is to help children, to educate kids. He's paid $180 a month. That's all we can afford right now, right? So and that's a fine salary for the slum, but it's not a fine salary. I'd like to pay him way more than that, but it's a fine salary for the slum for now. We give them food, like an aid package on a Friday as well, oil and sugar and all that sort of stuff. Bless him. He makes $180 a month, and he signed himself up for a $2,000 certified course on how to become a better teacher, because he felt like the certificate and the knowledge would essentially, upskill him, make him more effective, and give him more opportunity. To me, there's got to be a better way for him to get upskilled and certified with more opportunity than him giving away 2 years, net income 2 years. And then think about his running costs. He barely makes anything. How's he going to pay off $2,000? He's not. He's going to be in debt. And then people are going to come find him because he's probably got slum debt. And slum debt is the most expensive debt in the world, right? If you ever read the book, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, slum debt, it's like everything in the slum is more expensive than everywhere else, unfortunately. It's a weird thing. And so my idea is there a way for us to go and find curriculums that we break down into much smaller packages of learning that can be delivered at a low data cost because they're poor, right? So even the mobile data is expensive. That cost them like 50 cents, or $1 for this segment. And it's just a tiny piece of the much bigger thing that they learn, they get ticked off, the next thing gets delivered.
One of the concepts we've been kicking around is actually flipping the model on its head.
For the what?
Flipping this whole model on its head,
Okay.
paying for education, where somebody rocks up and they actually get paid to learn.
I remember you telling me this.
To learn to earn concept. So it's designed for inner city families and kids and slum-based individuals who there's a model put in place where by actually giving this aid in the form of this token to these communities, they can actually use it to purchase education. And then there's a revenue share with all these different all these different academies that sign up and provide free education can sign up and actually get some sort of revenue off of this token that's provided to people who can't normally afford education. That's the concept. And then based on your attention that you're actually giving to this learning, you're actually compensated for it. Because the truth is we want to upskill these impoverished people. Right? And the means of doing it are all based on US based prices and price points. And the fact that this guy got to pay basically 2 years salary to get his fucking certification is absurd.
Well, especially when you think Khan Academy is free, right?
Yeah.
And so the issue is not that the education isn't out there, because it is. It's already there, right? It's just not evenly distributed, right? And so it's like, is there a way for us to repackage it so that it can be evenly distributed? The reason there's a price, the reason I say $1 is to the point we made earlier. I think people need to pay things to feel like it's valuable. If it's free, I don't think they take it as they're so interested.
Yeah, most definitely. I think you just need the right UX research to see how these specific micro bits of education are deployed into these systems. That's everything. It's really hard to establish empathy with somebody who is paying, a third of his salary every month to the telephone program, right? To have access to maybe 100 megabytes a month. You say cost of data in these places is also very high. It's very scarce, right? Infrastructure is not built out. So
so the infrastructure is there, right? So cell phone penetration in Africa is it's done.
Really?
Everybody has phones.
But it's expensive relative to
But
their
data
income.
relative to income is expensive. So for instance, there's a company I'm looking to invest in at the moment that if you have spare cash, I think is very interesting. It's called Boost. A guy called Mike is the CEO. He's building the company. What Boost has done is they understand. So in Swahili, there's a thing called Mama Mboga. Mama Mboga means vegetable woman. And essentially it's these tiny little kiosks where you turn up and they have Colgate and they have a bar of soap and they have some spinach and so on and so forth. Right. And you go there at the end of your day with your 200 shillings and you buy 3 tomatoes, and a bar of soap to get you at home because you're living day by day. The vendor, the Mama Mboga, is giving credit to these people who just don't have enough money. And so she's writing all of this down on a piece of paper. And when the wholesaler is delivering the goods, she can't afford it. Mama Mboga can't pay the wholesaler because she has a credit line with her people, right? And so he's writing a whole thing on his piece of paper. And as a result, economic progress, GDP, productivity, etc., is stifled basically because of cash flow issues, because there's no way of understanding how to lend these people money because you don't know their credit scores. Right? And so what Mike is brilliantly doing, he's enabling the Mama Mbogas to order all of their inventory using WhatsApp. So 50 KB data transfers to these guys who then manage it through WhatsApp. And by doing that, they can now establish credit lines. They can provide product, inventory on credit, and it just frees up the system. And so it's something, maybe it's the wrong story to tell, but it's a story about, how innovative thinking around something like the mobile data issue.
And a lot of this tracks back to empathy. Actually being at the slums.
Yeah, you got to know
it.
Yeah.
The context is everything.
Yeah.
There's a great concept of tropicalization, which is taking something that works in one country, then bringing it to another. Where you have Uber that worked in the US. So then you have Gojek in Indonesia, which is now a multi-billion-dollar company, right? So taken that a step further, and not only going to the places that have the most profit, but bringing these, like we're talking about, as an ERP system, right? And bringing that to the lowest common denominator on earth can have tremendous value. These key innovations don't exist because, a lot of these people have never sat in front of a computer, right? And their mobile costs are very high. I mean, I remember reading about how your data credits through the cell phone towers, that's how a lot of these companies, these nations transact. If I buy a tomato off of you, I'm actually sending you credits in the form of data. And there's entire economies in Africa that operate just based on how much data they have available on their cell phones. That's the underlying economy, because everyone has a phone, and that is a transactable asset. This is where the empathy comes in, and this is where the UX research comes in, actually sitting down and being in the slums and sitting with them and understand the problem from a first principles perspective.
Well, the market's huge, and Africa is the only continent that is going to be, will have population growth, and obviously GDP correlates to amount of consumption. And how many people are consuming. So I think Africa is an amazing place to be building tools for, especially because you just get the joy of building something that matters.
I think it's a great way to end it. All right.
And then the robots kill us.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Sleep easy, knowing the robots are coming.